Good morning, everyone. My name is Marifil Castro. I will utilize lecturing as my teaching strategy in this activity. Welcome to today's lecture on infection control, a topic with great importance in the field of nursing. My name is Marifil, and I am delighted to be your guide through this critical aspect of healthcare that not only safeguards our patients but also protects healthcare workers and the broader community. At the end of this lecture, you're expected to understand the importance of infection control. You will learn the chain of infection and how to break it. You will be able to describe the different modes of transmission, implement the standard precautions, apply the transmission-based precautions, and promote continuous education and improvement. To define, infection control are measures practiced by healthcare personnel to prevent the spread, transmission, and acquisition of infection. Nosocomial infection, or also known as the healthcare associated infection or the hospital acquired infection, is an infection that is acquired in a hospital or other healthcare facility. Infection control in a healthcare facility is preventing the spread of microorganisms from patient to patient, from patient to staff, from staff to patient, or among staff. Before we proceed, let us first understand the chain of infection. The chain of infection has six links. It starts with an infectious agent that causes the disease. It can be a bacteria, virus, parasites, or a fungi. Then through a reservoir. This includes places in the environment where the pathogen lives and possibly multiply. It includes people, animals, and insects, medical equipment, soil, and water. Next is the portal of exit. This is the way the infectious agent leaves the reservoir through open wounds, aerosols, and splatters of body fluids, including coughing, sneezing, and saliva. Next is the mode of transmission. This is the way the infectious agent can be passed on through direct or indirect contact, ingestion, or inhalation. Next is the portal of entry. This is the way the infectious agent can enter a new host through broken skin, the respiratory tract, mucous membranes, and catheters and tubes. Finally, the susceptible host. This can be any person, the most vulnerable of whom are receiving health care, are immunocompromised, or have invasive medical devices, including the lines, devices, and airway. There are many different germs and infections inside and outside the healthcare setting. Despite the variety of viruses and bacteria, germs spread from person to person through a common series of events. Therefore, to prevent germs from infecting more people, we must break the chain of infection. No matter the germ, there are 6 points at which the chain can be broken and a germ can be stopped from infecting another person. The way to stop germs from spreading is by interrupting this chain at any link. Break the chain by cleaning your hands frequently, staying up to date on your vaccines, including the flu shots, covering coughs and sneezes, and staying home when sick. Following the rules for standard on-contact isolation, using personal protective equipment the right way, cleaning and disinfecting the environment, sterilizing medical instruments and equipment, following safe injection practices, and using antibiotics wisely to prevent antibiotic resistance. Infection control includes standard and isolation precautions. But first, let's talk about standard precautions. The standard precautions used to care for all patients, regardless of their diagnosis or presumed infection status. It is used to break the chain of infection transmission and is used in conjunction with isolation precautions. So all human blood and body substances are considered potentially infectious. Key components of standard precautions include hand hygiene, personal protective equipment or the PPE, waste management, linen management, patient care equipment, laboratory specimen, room cleaning, patient placement, and cough etiquette. Let's go through them one by one. Hand hygiene. Hand hygiene is universally recognized as one of the most effective measures to prevent the spread of infections. It's used to remove or kill microorganisms that colonize in the hands. There are two types of hand hygiene. These are hand washing and hand rubbing. Hand washing, used whenever the hands are visibly soiled or dirty, with the use of an antibacterial soap and water for 40 seconds. Hand rub, used whenever the hands are not visibly soiled or dirty, with the use of alcohol-based waterless hand rub for 20 to 30 seconds. So just remember, hand wash will be 40 to 60 seconds. Hand rub 20 to 30 seconds. So half of hand washing is the hand rubbing timing. 5 moments of hand hygiene are the moments that you're expected to do hand hygiene. It is before touching a patient, before doing a procedure, after touching a patient, and after leaving the patient's room. So for hand hygiene technique with alcohol-based formulation, it has 8 steps. Duration of the entire procedure will be 20 to 30 seconds as mentioned in the previous slides. And this is your hand washing technique, which has 11 slides with a duration of 40 to 60 seconds. The next slide has the most missed areas of hand washing. So it is important to follow the steps properly. The next topic is our personal protective equipment or our PPE. These are barriers between healthcare workers and patients, substances or surfaces. It prevents skin and mucous membranes exposure. So what are the types of PPEs? These are gowns or aprons, masks, goggles or face shield, and gloves. Gowns or plastic aprons are used to protect skin, clothing, during procedures that may generate splashes or aerosolization of body substances and cause the soiling of clothes. So, when to wear an apron or a gown, if you're suspecting a close contact that may lead to contamination of microbes from the patient materials or equipment. So, there are two types of gowns we're using in the institution. These are clean gowns and sterile gowns. So clean gowns are generally used for isolation, and sterile gowns are only necessary for performing invasive procedures such as inserting a central line. Next is the mask. So we have surgical or N95. If splashing or aerosolization of blood or body fluid is expected, we have to wear a mask. Change mask between patients and sooner if mask becomes wet, moist, or torn. Wear an N95 mask when indicated to enter an airborne isolation room and remove it only when outside of the room. For the goggles and face shield, if required for combined protection from eyes or face contamination by aerosolized body substances. For the gloves, wear the gloves whenever in contact with blood, other body substances, or contaminated items and surfaces, and when in an isolation room. Wear and change gloves between task procedures on the same patient. So perform hand hygiene immediately after removing gloves. Gloves are not to be worn after leaving the patient room or procedure area. So use non-sterile gloves for examination and other clean procedures, and use sterile gloves for invasive procedures. So these are the sequence for donning and doffing of PPEs. So for donning, we have to start with the gown, and then mask, goggles, and finally the gloves. Then for removal, we have to remove the most dirty first. So it will be the gloves and the goggles or the face shield, and then your gown, mask or respirator, and then of course wash hands or do hand rubbing after removing your PPEs. So Other sequence also are noted, like you can remove gloves and gowns altogether. For the waste management, these are all waste generated by any healthcare establishments, research facilities, laboratories, and etc. So for needles and sharps, dispose of used sharp items in an approved puncture-resistant container immediately after use, at the point of use or as close to the point of use as possible. Do not recap or manipulate needles using both hands because this increases the risk of injury. If recapping or manipulation of the needle is deemed essential, then use either one-handed scoop technique or a mechanical device designed to hold the needle sheath. Close sharps containers when three-fourths full and remove for incineration. And the next slide is about management of needle stick or sharp injuries. So in case you will have this uh, incident, you have to wash any cuts and needle sticks with soap and water, under running water preferably, and do not squeeze. All percutaneous injuries and mucocutaneous exposures must be reported. So injured employees should report immediately to employee health clinic during the normal working hours or to the emergency room after working hours or during the weekend. Hepatitis B post-exposure prophylaxis, when indicated, should be initiated within 48 hours and of the exposure incident and no later than 7 days. It is the responsibility of all employees at risk of exposure to blood or body fluids to secure receipt of a full course of hepatitis B vaccine and to observe standard precautions. If the hepatitis vaccine is refused or the full vaccine series is not completed, so the employee will be required to sign a disclaimer form. So during the pre-hiring, so we are expected to submit our titer results, right? So this is the safe injection practices. So injected medicines are commonly used in healthcare settings for prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. So unsafe injection practices put patients and healthcare providers at risk of infections. Safe injection practices are part of the standard precautions and are aimed at maintaining basic levels of patient safety. So in the photo, it's one needle, one syringe, one time, so single use, so it will be equals to zero infection. So do not reuse the needle. CDC reminds the healthcare personnel of the following practices that are critical for patient safety. So follow proper infection control practices and maintain aseptic technique during the preparation and administration of injected medications, like perform hand hygiene. Never administer medications from the same syringe to more than one patient, even if the needle is changed. Never enter a vial with a used syringe or needle. Do not use medications packaged as single dose or single use for more than one patient. Do not use bags of intravenous solutions as a common source of supply for more than one patient. Limit the use of multi-dose vials and dedicate them to a single patient whenever possible. Next, for the waste management includes the medical waste disposal. So place biomedical waste in identifiable color-coded bags or appropriate containers. Securely tie or close bags, containers, and remove for appropriate disposal. So in our institution, we're using the biohazard bag, which is color yellow for the infectious waste, clinical infectious waste, and the red bag for body parts like the placenta. Some institutions are using the violet, which is indicated for the cytotoxic materials, then black for the domestic waste, and blue for the hygienic waste, which are considered non-hazardous. For the linen management, linen should be handled and transported in a manner to prevent skin or mucous membrane exposure and contamination of clothing or transferring microorganisms to other patients or the environment. So make sure the hamper is with you. Place wet or heavily soiled linen in a designated impermeable bag and close the bag securely. Patient care equipment. Handle used patient care equipment in a manner that prevents skin and mucous membrane exposure, contamination of clothing, and transfer of microorganisms to other patients or the environment. Commonly used equipment must be cleaned and disinfected between patients. Do not reuse single-use disposable equipments, and ensure that reusable equipment is properly transported in leak-proof containers to CSSD before use with another patient for sterilization. For patient placement, place patients who pose a risk of transmission to others in single patient rooms when available, like those with uncontained secretions, excretions, or wound drainage, or infants with suspected viral respiratory tract or gastrointestinal tract infections. So if it's not possible, then cohort. For the cough etiquette, cover nose and mouth with a tissue, then coughing or sneezing. Dispose of used tissue in the nearest waste receptacle. Clean hands with soap and water or antiseptic solution with an alcohol-based hand rub after touching respiratory secretions or handling contaminated. For the last part of our lecture will be the isolation expanded precaution, which is also known as the transmission-based precautions. It, it is designed for patients documented to be or suspected or known to be infected or colonized with highly transmissible or epidemiologically important pathogens for which additional precautions beyond standard precautions are required. Types of isolation precautions includes the contact, droplet, and the airborne transmission. So contact transmission defined as direct or indirect contact with a patient or his or her environment, including person's room or objects, in contact with a person that has an infection with an organism transmitted fecal orally, such as the C. difficile, or the wound and skin infections, or the multi-drug resistant bacteria, such as the MRSA. So contact precaution is being the most common precaution. Next is the droplet transmission, so generated when an infected person coughs, sneezes, or talks, or during procedures such as suctioning, endotracheal intubation, cough induction by chest physiotherapy, and cardiopulmonary resuscitation. It is defined as more than 5 micrometers in size, so it is heavier, so it cannot travel long. Airborne transmission occurs by dissemination of either airborne droplet nuclei or small particles in the respirable size range containing infectious agents that remain infective over time and distance. It is defined as less than 5 micrometer in size, so it will remain in the environment for a longer period. The next slides are examples of infectious agents that are transmitted via the contact route. This includes the escapeg pathogens. First is the Enterococcus faecium or the VRE, vancomycin resistant Enterococcus, the Staph aureus, our MRSA, VRSA, and the Visa, the Klebsiella pneumoniae, our ESBL or the extended spectrum beta-lactamase, Klebsiella pneumoniae carbapinamase producer. And then we have the Acinetobacter baumannii, the Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Enterobacter species, and the gram-negative bacteria. So these are all can be transmitted through contact route. So these are the recommendations from CDC for the contact precautions. So first, you have to ensure appropriate patient placement. Again, if Single patient space is available, so to place the patient in the single room. If not available, then cohort. So same cases, same microorganisms in one room. Use personal protective equipment appropriately, including the gloves and the gown. Wear a gown and gloves for all interactions that may involve contact with the patient or the patient's environment. So donning PPE upon room entry and properly discard before exiting the patient room is done to contain pathogens. Limit transport and movement of patients outside the room to medically necessary purposes only. So when a transport or movement is necessary, cover or contain the infected or colonized area of the patient's body. So remove and dispose contaminated PPE and perform hand hygiene prior to transporting patients on contact precautions. Don PPE to handle the patient at the transport location. Use disposable or dedicated patient care equipment, like for our thermometers and the blood pressure cuffs. So if common use of equipment for multiple patient is unavoidable, clean and disinfect such equipment before use on another patient. Prioritize cleaning and disinfection of the rooms of the patients and contact precautions, ensuring rooms are frequently cleaned and disinfected, at least daily. Uh, Focusing on frequently touched surfaces and equipments in the immediate vicinity of the patient. And this is the sample card to be placed on the door for the isolation room for contact precautions. So it has the precautions that the visitors and healthcare providers will follow. And then let's go to the droplet route. These are the infectious agents that can be transmitted via the droplet route. It includes the Bordetella pertussis, influenza viruses, adenovirus, rhinovirus, Mycoplasma pneumoniae, group A strep, Neisseria meningitis. This is the CDC recommendations for droplet precautions. So for the source control, put a mask on the patient and then use PPE appropriately. Wear mask upon entry into the patient room or patient space. So for patient placement, again, if single room is possible, then place in a single room. If not, then cohort. For limit transport and movement of patients outside the room to medically necessary purposes. Again, if transport or movement outside of the room is necessary, so we have to instruct the patient to wear a mask and follow respiratory hygiene or the cough etiquette. Like the contact precautions, we have also droplet precaution poster to be attached, to be placed on the door of the isolation room, where everyone can read clearly. Let's go to the infectious agents that are transmitted by the airborne route. This includes three diseases: the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, the Rubella viruses, or the measles, varicella zosters, or the chickenpox. So these are the recommendations for airborne precautions from CDC. So for the source control, put a mask on the patient and then use personal protective equipment appropriately. So this time, we have to wear the N95 respirator. Ensure appropriate patient placement in an airborne infection isolation room constructed according to the guidelines for isolation precautions. So, in settings where airborne precautions cannot be implemented due to limited engineering resources, so masking the patient and placing the patient in a private room with the door closed will reduce the likelihood of airborne transmission until the patient is either transferred to a facility with, with negative pressure room or returned home. So limit transport and movement of patients outside of the room to medically necessary purposes. So if transport or movement outside the negative pressure room is necessary, instruct patients to wear a surgical mask. If possible, observe respiratory hygiene or cough etiquette. So healthcare personnel transporting patients who are on airborne precautions do not need to wear a mask or respirator during transport if the patient is wearing a mask and infectious skin lesions are covered. Restrict susceptible healthcare personnel from entering the room of patients known or suspected to have measles, chickenpox, disseminated zoster, or smallpox if other immune healthcare personnel are available. So immunize susceptible persons as soon as possible following unprotected contact with vaccine preventable infections like the measles, varicella, or the smallpox. This is the poster to be placed on the door, and this is the guidelines on how to wear and remove an N95 mask properly. These are my reference. Do you have any questions? So clean hands and save lives. Thank you. Thank you, and that's the end of our lecture.